actually the catalyst for thinking homeschool. We were looking at the school down the street, which was literally down the end of our street. We could see it from our front driveway. And I went to tour the school, and they were very proud of the fact that they had an iPad available for every kindergartner for the
Mm,
entirety of the day. And I'm like, I've spent the last 5 years trying to keep my kids off of screens. Why would I send him down the
yeah.
street to sit in a desk on a screen and be managed, on a screen all day?
Hello, everyone. Rachel Carman here today, and I have a brand new friend I'm going to get to know today along with you, and that is Whitney Newby. Thank you, Whitney, for joining us today. Thanks, and welcome to Let's Talk Homeschool.
Thank you so much. I am really glad to be here.
Yeah, you're brand new, I must admit, brand new person to me. I'm very excited to get to have this conversation with you. I have enjoyed perusing your website and
Oh,
looking through your beautiful new book. It's
thank
just,
you.
I'm all about that. If we're going to go and we're going to publish a book, it should be beautiful. And
Absolutely.
you have achieved that. So let's back up the bus just a little bit, Whitney. Tell our audience about who you are and why you're so good at making everything so beautiful.
That's so sweet. That is so kind. My name is Whitney Newby, and I am married to Sean, and we have four kiddos who are currently 12, 10, 7, and 5. We have
Mm,
been homeschooling since the beginning, so since our oldest was in preschool, and it's something I never really foresaw, but
mm.
we have fallen in love with the lifestyle. And I have a ministry business called Brighter Day Press, and we create gospel centered, literature rich resources for family discipleship
Mm,
mainly. And I just authored a book, and I was privileged to also do the art. So
yeah.
everything we make, we strive for it to be biblical, beautiful, and manageable. And
Mm,
those are kind of our three pillars. And so I am thankful that, you said it's a beautiful book. That was one of my hopes. So,
yeah. It
yeah.
is indeed a beautiful book. In fact, full confession, when I was looking through it, I was kept looking for the artist.
Oh, that's
I
so
thought,
funny.
where's the name of the illustrator?
I know. I
Oh.
kind of wish it was clearer, but yes, I did all of that, and I am self-taught as far as
Oh,
watercolor goes,
goodness.
but I teach watercolor classes
Mm.
online, which has been really fun. So, yeah, it's one of my favorite mediums that I just picked up actually since my oldest was a baby because it's so easy to clean up. It dries so quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas acrylics and oil are kind of a mess with babies and toddlers
Hmm.
around. So,
Yes.
yes.
Oh, it is. That just, you're inspiring me. I have a dear friend who's actually one of my prayer partners, who is convinced that I too can paint. So
Oh,
she
I
comes
believe
over.
it.
Oh, I love your faith in me and her faith in me. Just, I almost brought for show and tell and actually for comic relief something that I had done. And I thought, no, no, I'm not going to do that to either one
Oh
of
my
us.
goodness.
But I do think what you've done here, you are building on those three pillars. And I really, really appreciate the richness of the beauty. It just
Mm,
complements what you're challenging these moms with.
mm,
And even in this very short introduction that you've given, there's 1,000 different directions we can go, right?
sure. Yes.
So let's start about this is my favorite in the book, by the way.
Illustration.
I love
Oh,
that
the
illustration.
butterfly. I love
Um,
that too.
yeah, I'm all about the butterflies and the moths even. So let's back
Yes.
up a little bit. Talk to me about the creation of this ministry, Brighter Day Press. What brought that about? I mean, you're starting to homeschool, you're
Right.
obviously a young mom. I also read that you're a registered nurse, so it's not like you're sitting on your sofa eating bonbons.
Right.
You have
Right.
plenty to do. So, talk to me
Yeah.
about where did the genesis of this ministry begin?
So back in 2020, we had just moved in January of 2020, and this matters with the
Okay.
timeline of things. We had just moved from North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, to Fort Worth, Texas, and 6 weeks later, everything shut down.
Mm,
And at the time, we were already homeschooling, and we loved homeschooling. We had little ones, but we had really fallen in love with that lifestyle. And And so I was balancing work as a nurse at a local hospital with homeschooling. It was just a very,
Mm,
very full season.
yeah.
And so when we moved, I thought, I'll wait till around March to find a job at a local hospital because nursing is so flexible. So I was able to kind of do both. Well, in March 2020, everything shut down and no one was hiring nurses because
Wow.
no one was really coming to the hospital unless they were absolutely in need. And
Hmm.
so I had more time on my hands than I had in a long time. And so I began sharing on my Instagram some of these, and I had a small Instagram following at the time, but some of the things that I was finding were really bearing fruit in my young family. And so
Hmm.
what it looked like was us gathering for morning time every morning and spending maybe just 30 minutes reading
Hmm.
scripture together, singing a hymn, reciting scripture, memorizing scripture together, doing read alouds. And so I had written down these plans in a format, a 36-week format, and
Hmm.
said, would anyone be interested in like a download of this? And that's where Brighter Day Press was born. That was our
Wow.
first volume of Morning Time. And since then, God has just given so much inspiration and stamina, frankly, to keep producing these Christ-centered resources. We have, I think, over 80 products now that
Hmm.
are all, so they're all from a Christ-centered worldview. We have a lot
Hmm.
of unit studies for different holidays. And so we're looking at these different holidays with picture book recommendations and simple
Hmm.
activities and healthy recipes, but
Yeah.
all pointing back to who God is and what he's doing in the world. And so it has just been a really fun ride for the last 5 years.
Yeah, I'm going to say I got to, like I said earlier, peruse your website, and the thing that I love about it is it's beautiful and it's simple. I
Yes.
think sometimes, and certainly if you've ever attended a homeschool conference, you walk like, I don't know, maybe only two steps in, and it's like
It's
and
so overwhelming.
it is so overwhelming, and
Yeah.
it feels complicated
Yes.
in what I now know to be an unnecessary way. And I love the simplicity of what you're offering because you're
Mm,
covering the most important things,
yeah.
which are honoring God, worshiping God, seeking Him in His Word, spending that peaceful time at the beginning. And I love that it's at the
Yes.
beginning. And
Yes.
on your website, there's a picture of your chalkboard. And you had me at the sunflower because that is
Oh,
my favorite flower.
I love it.
But at the top of your day, what you're going to do for your day is God's word. I
Hmm.
love that. I love
Yes.
that.
I mean, so my husband and I actually met in Bible college.
Mhm.
And so his word has just been central to our lives, which it doesn't matter that we have Bible degrees. It should be central to the believer's life in
Yes.
general. But we have just found, I mean, when we seek his kingdom first, and then all
Hmm.
these things are added unto you, when we start our day in scripture and we are beginning to see fruit, spiritual fruit in
Hmm.
our children, and there is nothing more rewarding and
Hmm.
nothing, better than that. And so I think when we do keep our focus on the main things, and
Hmm.
that means we may not, if we've spent more time in the Word or more time reading aloud, more time in discussion about spiritual things or what's going on in the world,
Hmm.
and we may not get to our history lesson that day. We may not get to science, and it's okay. It will
It's okay.
happen. But at the center of our
Hmm.
home has to be God's Word.
I totally and completely agree with you. And I think it's one of those things that I'm very grateful there are many of us
Mm.
who are saying that.
Yes,
And I think
yes,
we need to keep saying it. I don't
yes.
know about you, Whitney, but sometimes I feel like, Lord, there's got to be something new I need to say.
Right.
And so often he's like, no, sweetie, just say the same thing again.
So
And
true.
and I see that in his word too, right? He's so faithful
Hmm.
in his word to say the same thing over and over and over
Yes.
because we need it over and over and
We
over.
do. We need
We
that
we
reminder.
really do. And I'm
Yep.
so grateful to find yet another voice that is saying, seek ye first. It really does matter.
Yes.
I was amused to find that you even have a March book madness. And
Yes.
so that's pretty timely where we are right now. Tell me a little bit about how that came apart. I just thought that
Yeah.
was the coolest idea.
So I am really passionate about sharing book recommendations that are
Hmm.
wholesome, engaging, rich, age appropriate, as
Hmm.
these days in 2025, it is hard to navigate our local libraries because there is so much agenda woven in and
Hmm.
placed on the shelves. And so I want to provide parents with easy ways that are, you can engage your kids with
Yeah.
great books. And so this is our fifth year of doing March Book Madness. And basically, I chose 16 picture books that I had never recommended. And people all over the country have checked these out. And then they're in a bracket where you read those picture books aloud to your kids, and then your kids vote on a favorite until you come to a winner. And it's actually been kind of a heated discussion in my house because we have four kids. And so sometimes it's an even split. And they're like, Mom, you can make the final call, which I don't want to do that because they're all
Right.
so good.
Yeah.
But what I've learned as Christian parents, that we need to still be in our local libraries, even if they're pushing
Hmm.
agendas, because every book that you check out, and people may not know this, every book that you check out is like casting a vote.
Hmm.
So your library is keeping a tally of the books that are checked out. And if a book is not checked out, it's going to be tossed or
Hmm.
given in a library sale. But if it's checked out over and over, and we want to be casting our vote for these wholesome, rich, age appropriate books, then they'll order more copies of it. And so March
Yeah.
Madness is more than just really fun. It is really fun, but it also serves a greater purpose in libraries across America.
Yeah, no, I think that is an excellent point to make because we have an obligation, I believe, as believers to practice discernment.
Yes.
And sometimes we're called to practice that discernment on the behalf of other people
Hmm.
who aren't believers and don't know about how to be discerning. And so as we exercise those muscles and check out those really good resources, we indeed do bless other people that
Yes.
perhaps we may not even meet. So that is a
Yes.
beautiful thing, and for our kids to be able to participate in that, I think is really powerful too.
Absolutely.
Why do we check out this book and we don't check out that book?
Right.
There are
Right.
real reasons. And then
Yes.
teaching our kids, it matters what we put in our heads.
It
It
does.
literally matters, and
Yes.
I think that is really powerful. I'm going to step back again. You mentioned a
Sure.
minute ago, and I think that this is something, I think these are stories we really do need to be sharing
Mm.
as often as we can. And that is, you mentioned that homeschooling wasn't necessarily, at the top of your list of things to do in your life. That was very true for me. I
Yeah.
won't go back over our story again because our listeners have heard it before, but tell me, Whitney, how'd you get into this since this isn't something that you thought you were going to do? And how is it that God has blessed you and shown himself faithful in this journey?
Oh, he is so faithful. So back when I had a 5, almost 6 year old, and we were looking into different school options, and he was a voracious learner already. He was one of those kids that was really challenging as a toddler and preschooler. But once he began to read, and he began reading very early. So he
Mm,
was reading chapter books by the time he was 5, 6 years old,
wow.
which has not been the norm for my other kids. So I don't want people to hear that. But by the time I was to send him to kindergarten, he was already flying through chapter books, could not get
Wow.
enough. And in the state of North Carolina, it is not compulsory that you send a child to school until they're 7 years old.
Right,
So
right.
I didn't even have to let anyone know that we were homeschooling. And I thought, okay, I'll just keep him home for 1 year. He's
Mm-hmm.
already reading, he already loves learning. Surely I
Mm-hmm.
can't mess this up, but I will definitely send him to school in first grade.
Sure.
And actually, the catalyst for thinking homeschool, we were looking at the school down the street, which was literally down the end of our street. We could see it from our front driveway. And I went to tour the school, and they were very proud of the fact that they had an iPad available for every kindergartner for the
Mm,
entirety of the day. And I'm like, I've spent the last 5 years trying to keep my kids off of screens. Why would I send him down the
yeah.
street to sit in a desk on a screen and be managed, on a screen all day? And so within that year, we ended up starting homeschool within a week of making the decision. So I
Mm,
had very little to go on. I took a homeschool mom from our church out to coffee and just asked her a lot of questions. And she was very helpful on a practical note. But
mm-hmm.
more than anything, she just gave me the confidence that I
Mm,
could do this and we could
mm-hmm.
thrive in this, and that
Yeah.
it would be a delight and a joy. And it truly has been. And so that year, we just fell in love with the lifestyle. And
Mm.
at first, I was like many homeschool moms where all I had known was traditional school. And so I'm standing at a chalkboard and my son is sitting at a desk and squirming. And that lasted about 15 minutes, before
Yep.
you realize that is not sustainable.
Yep.
And now I just love the beauty of like we're done by lunchtime with our
Mm.
homeschool. We wake up early
Yep.
and we get our work done, and then our kids just enjoy being outside, having free time,
Hmm.
pursuing their interests. And I really can't imagine anything else, anything better.
No, no, I totally agree. And I love the vision that you're casting because this is the one that we share the same heartbeat, right? This is
Mm,
the one I want to cast is you really can do this. I mean,
yes. Yes.
breathe. I mean, this is a beautiful thing. It's not a
Yes.
tense thing.
No,
It's not this tidal wave of curriculum and
exactly.
worksheets and red pens. I mean, this is this beautiful family coming together,
It
reading books
is.
together, and I can see that that's what you caught a vision for just in that short period of time.
Yes, it's so natural.
Hmm.
It feels very unnatural to send our kids to a school and entrust them to someone that doesn't care about their flourishing as
Mm.
much as we do.
Right.
And I feel like what I've learned in the last 7 or 8 years of homeschooling is just that homeschooling is really just an extension of intentional parenting.
Yes.
If you've already been reading to your kids, you've already been studying them to find out what their interests are and to feed those
Hmm.
interests. I mean, that is the foundation of a great homeschool. And
Hmm.
beyond selecting the perfect curriculum, what your kids need is a warm,
Mm.
responsive, consistent parent. And you are
Yes.
probably already doing that.
Yes. And this is another thing over at your website, which by the way, the book is beautiful. The website is beautiful, right?
Thank you.
I want one of everything. I've decided I'm going to, make an order for my grandchildren.
Yes.
But you have a getting started. I've got notes here, so my cheat sheet.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about right now is completely reflected in what you recommend for
Mm,
getting started. And I love that because every one of your points is bathed in grace
mm,
and freedom. And one of
yes.
them was, find somebody locally. So, I mean,
Mm,
I'm all for maybe those long distance mentors we all have. Mine
sure.
was Deborah Bell. I don't know if you've heard.
Mm, I don't.
Deborah was just amazing. I remember
Oh,
sitting in an audience. She came to our state conference. And I remember, I think, so we have seven, and my oldest might have been 12. I think I had somebody on my hip. But
okay.
anyway,
Wow.
I'm sitting in the audience, and she was talking about raising self-motivated learners. Like it wasn't your
Yes.
job to teach them in the 12th grade. It was your job
Right.
somewhere in junior high to hand the baton off and say, now you do what I've taught you to do, right?
Yes.
And I was just sitting there just crying, going, I just want him to do a spelling list.
Right.
The idea of having him do anything else, it was just
Yes.
overwhelming. And yet over time she was right as
Mm,
I implemented what she was saying. And
yes.
then as God would have it, like 10 years later, I got to meet and work with Deb Bell because
Oh,
God is
wow.
just so good.
That's amazing.
And those kind of mentorships are valuable, right? And
They are.
I'm sure that you have people even now that listen and
Yes.
watch you and that you're mentoring long distance that you may never
Yes.
meet, right? And that's
Right.
fabulous.
Yeah.
But boy, there's nothing to replace somebody with skin on.
You are so right. And I mean, look for the woman in your church with the well-worn Bible.
Yes,
Even if
yes.
it's not someone who has experience homeschooling, they can come
Hmm.
alongside you and just encourage you as a woman, as a mom.
Yes.
And yeah, so I think
Yeah.
that's such a good point.
Yeah, and so you suggested that, and I really do think it has been my experience in speaking that a lot of the women that I think we really need to hear from, like the woman that you're describing with the well-worn Bible,
Yes.
sometimes we need to approach them.
Yes,
Sometimes
absolutely.
we don't need to blame them for not approaching us.
Exactly.
Sometimes we need to approach them.
Yes, definitely. I actually had a conversation yesterday on Instagram Live about discipleship. It was
Mm,
with Hunter Beless and Courtney Doctor, who have just
mm,
co-authored a study on Titus. And one
mm-hmm.
thing that they said was, when you're approaching someone about a discipleship relationship, a mentoring relationship, give them some specifics. Ask, hey,
Yes.
I would love to meet you twice a month for
Mm-hmm.
coffee at this time. And I would love to just ask you questions about this particular topic. That
Mm,
is so doable. But when you
yes.
just hear, I want you to mentor me, and it's like, where do I go from there? That feels a
Yeah.
little overwhelming. So just be
No.
specific.
Yeah. I mean, that is such good advice.
Yeah.
And I even heard related to that, could we meet, 4 or 5 times, or could we meet the next
Yes,
2 months? Give it sort of a
totally.
parentheses, because you can always
Yes.
extend that, but I mean, it
Sure.
just sort of makes it again that more doable. You
Absolutely.
used the word earlier, manageable, which I think is
Yes.
just so key.
Yeah.
The indefinite nature of can you mentor me? Like, I don't know what we're going to do and I don't know how long, but could we start tomorrow?
Exactly.
That's
That's
overwhelming.
daunting.
It
Yes.
is, it is. The other thing that you said that I thought, and you're getting started, was give yourself time. Give yourself
Yes.
time. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that? Since I really appreciate you sharing your story, how you got into this and how you thought, surely I can't mess up the first year. That was kind of my mantra when we
Yeah.
started. And then yet you fell in love with
Hmm.
what this was doing in your family. Can you talk to maybe the new homeschool mother out there? Can you talk to her about how much time? And I know that there's not a definitive, but can you talk to her
Sure.
about how you gave yourself that time? We seem to be so hard on each other about that.
Yeah, we really are. And I think it takes a full year to really
Mm,
start settling into a rhythm. Although I will confess that just a couple years ago, so we had been homeschooling for 5 years,
mm.
and my oldest son commented, I think we finally found our rhythm.
Oh,
And I was like, oh my
wow.
goodness, that was 5 years. And this is what I
Mm-hmm.
do for a living. But I think he's right. It took us that
Mm-hmm.
long because we had babies and toddlers, and
Sure.
every year is a little bit different.
Yep.
But I do think give yourself time. And I think part of that for us, so we started with a boxed curriculum. We used
Sure.
Sunlight our first year, which I
Mm-hmm.
think was actually a great choice because
Mm-hmm.
it had a teacher's manual. It told
Sure.
me exactly what to do. So I knew I couldn't mess it up too badly. But during that year, I realized, okay, this part of the curriculum is working really well for us. This isn't working as well. So, what are we going to
Mm-hmm.
do for next year? But I
Mm-hmm.
stuck with that curriculum for the entire year. And we had a fantastic year, even though it wasn't, what we're using now. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
just that fear of choosing the wrong curriculum or choosing
Mm-hmm.
the wrong homeschooling philosophy, don't let
Mm-hmm.
that grip you like it can, because
Mm-hmm.
again, what your kids need is this warm, responsive, consistent parent who
Right.
is going to work through it with you, or
Right.
you're going to work alongside them and find what works best, and eventually find your rhythm.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that you said that I just really think is so powerful and we need to keep saying. When we first started, and I'm the kind of person that I love a schedule,
Yes.
and I love a to-do list, and I love to know, I love to know what I'm supposed to do, and
Check the boxes.
I do.
Yes.
I love to check boxes that aren't there. So if I find
Yes.
myself doing something that I wasn't on the list, I am not above writing it down so I can mark it off.
Totally.
So, but I really tortured all of us for a few years
Hmm.
because I was so in love with my schedule
Yes.
that I held people hostage to it, right? And I
Sure.
made everybody miserable. I mean, we were miserable by 8:15 because we were
Yeah.
already off schedule. This
Right.
idea of rhythm, I just don't think that we can overemphasize
Yeah.
the idea of rhythm. And I really appreciate your son saying, "Hey, I think we finally hit this." That's
Yeah.
really beautiful.
It is. Well, and being open to change. Even
Yes.
even last year, I was noticing we were starting with our morning time, and our morning time has grown from, 15 or 20 minutes to now
Hmm.
sometimes a couple of hours, because
Sure.
we are doing all of these subjects together as a family, and it
Hmm.
takes longer. But by the time we were done with that, no one was interested in their independent work because we had
Ah,
already spent that time. So now we actually do independent work first, and
okay.
our morning time last. fast. It's still technically in the morning, but
Mm-hmm.
it has worked so well. And who's not to say it could change again, but
Right.
being flexible and yet having expectations. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, we every week I print out a list for each of my kids of the expectations of what they are to do for their independent work so they can
Mm-hmm.
see it, but I don't care what order they do it in or
Mm-hmm.
just that it gets done. And that
Right.
has given them some structure, but also freedom within that
Mm-hmm.
structure.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I do like the idea of both and for your student.
Yeah,
Let them know what's going to motivate them to do the things maybe they're not as excited about and still
exactly.
get the other stuff done. That's really
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, everything you're saying, just a hearty amen,
Oh,
everything. So, as you think about other parents maybe starting
hmm
who, like yourself, had not thought that this was going to be it.
yeah.
And let's say they're fearful of picking the right curriculum, or they're
Mm,
fearful maybe of being alone. That's a huge thing. Like
yeah,
they don't know
sure.
anybody who does this.
Right.
Or maybe they're fearful of the socialization of their children. Pick one of those, Whitney. Which one of those do you think you would have a word of encouragement for? Because those are all
Yeah.
kind of loom large for most people.
Oh, they do. I would say socialization was one of my fears as I went in because I thought, how are we going to do this? And how intentional do I have to be about, finding friends for my kids and how am I going to
Mhm.
fit this in? And really, I had maybe only known a few homeschoolers and they
Mm.
were a little awkward, which,
Sure,
we all have had that experience.
sure, yeah.
Now, honestly, it is at the bottom of the list of my fears. I have just realized there are so many avenues for socialization, even just within the walls of my own home.
Hmm.
The siblings are together all the time. We are very involved in our church. We're able
Hmm.
to be good neighbors. We really, I feel like, have more opportunities for socialization, not less. And so
Yes.
that's just been, honestly, this year, we've had to kind of pull back a little bit because we were doing so many things that we were
Hmm.
missing out on family time. And so I
Mm.
would just encourage people, I think they'll discover pretty quickly that that's just not something you're going to have to be fearful of. Yes, you have to be intentional, like
Yeah.
all things, but
Hmm.
yeah, that's been a really sweet surprise.
Something else that you mentioned that I think we would be amiss not to touch on is you've moved at least two times so far that I can count
Yes.
pretty significantly,
Yes.
and we live in a pretty mobile
hmm
culture, and moving is something that's pretty common. I speak to a lot of military families that move.
Yes.
Did a couple of women's events earlier this year, and in the prayer requests that I received, several of them mentioned, we're facing a move, we're facing a move.
Yes.
Moving with homeschool has its advantages, right? It
Absolutely.
has its challenges. Can you speak to those? How did you navigate that? Did you close down school for 6 weeks?
hmm
Did you keep it going? How would you encourage someone facing another move?
Yeah, it is hard. It is a huge
Hmm.
life transition, but we have found that homeschool has been such an anchor for us
Hmm.
because it's a rhythm that we can maintain even on the road. So we can
Hmm.
even pull certain aspects of our morning time and we can do them in the car.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how our kids become accountability and they're like, hey, we haven't done our Bible reading today. What are we
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah.
And so it's been a really sweet, emotional, spiritual anchor for us. But yes, we actually, as we moved from Fort Worth, Texas to Greenville, South Carolina last August, we had a month between our closing dates, which was
Oh,
tough.
wow. Yeah,
So
that is
we
tough.
were homeless for a month and just going traveling that whole time. And so I really let myself off the hook for that month or
Hmm.
6 weeks because I wanted to just be a joyful mom as much as I could be during that transition. And so we stocked up on great books to just make sure
Yeah.
we're all reading and feeding our minds. But otherwise, we just enjoyed the time off. So I don't think there's any shame in that, especially as you care for yourself as the parent. I think that is really important because if we are doing well emotionally, spiritually, physically, that is
Hmm.
going to spill over into our kids' lives and our homeschool. If we are uptight and stressed, they're going to sense that as well. And so do
So
what makes
true.
sense for you as the parent.
No, I think everything you're saying there is exactly right. We've got to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. And
Hmm.
I'm betting, Whitney, that one of the ways that you take care of yourself is by painting. When
Yes.
in the world do you have time to paint? Talk to us about those
Yes.
self-care rhythms that you have. I'm starting to come up, the self-care thing I think can take on ungod honoring
Sure.
proportions, right? When we chase
Yes.
after, in the words of Solomon, we chase after the wind of the world, right? And the
Hmm.
world says, especially as women, we've got to do X, Y, and Z to take
Right.
care of ourselves. And I think we can really be hypnotized into believing that that's where the answers are. Well, I
Yes.
just don't think that's true. I'm starting to believe in sanctified self-care. So if,
Yes.
if you
I
want
love
to,
that.
under that umbrella of sanctified self-care, tell us where painting fits in for you and how do you do that? Because I've only painted a little bit with my friend, again, my friend that believes in me, and I'm not so sure I do yet.
Yeah.
But when I've done it, there is something really glorious about
Mm,
the brush and the colors and the water and the
yes.
result, even if it's never going to hang in a museum. There's
Absolutely.
something wonderful about that. So talk to us about how do you do that? How do you incorporate it into your school? I noticed there was a picture, I think, on your website. I think it was your daughter who was, I think, coloring a
Yes.
page, but obviously you're
Yes.
incorporating that, which
Yes.
would only make sense because all of your stuff is so beautiful.
Well,
So
thank you.
how do you do that? Because I think that
Yeah.
that's something we could all stand to have instead of, I tend to put it off and think, yeah, I know when the kids grow up, I'll do that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but I think it would have been healthier if I had been able to incorporate it better. So
Definitely.
how do we do that?
Well, I totally agree with you about self-care and how our culture, just kind of demands that and says you
Hmm.
really can't be a good mom without just kind of extreme self-care. So,
Yeah.
without 8 hours of sleep or, time away from the kids. And sometimes that isn't possible. And so how we can care for ourselves, we actually can look to Jesus in his ministry throughout the Gospels. And how did he care for himself during
Hmm.
grueling days of ministry? And he withdrew from these
Hmm.
noisy, needy crowds to get alone with the Father. But his purpose in that was not just to fill up, but in order to be poured out, to be
Hmm.
able to have the strength to
Yes.
serve. And so I think when our perspective shifts, when we think, okay, what could I do today that is going to fill me up because I know that I'm going to be poured out for the needs of my family?
Hmm.
I am
Yeah.
going to strengthen myself to then serve. And so that might look different ways for different people. For me, our kids are allowed to come downstairs in the morning at 7:30. That has always been our rule, and a lot of times they sleep past that. But if they're up early, they can go ahead and get dressed, do their Bible studies for our older two, but they
Hmm.
do not come downstairs until 7:30 on the
Mm.
dot. And so I know that the time before 7:30 is mine, and I am able
Mm.
to be in the Word. Sometimes I do paint in the morning as I listen to the Bible through an audio Bible
Mm.
app, and it is such a worship experience for me. And by the
Hmm.
time they come down, I am ready to engage with them
Yeah.
because I've gotten my heart and my spirit right. There have been times, I paint late at night. And then every
Hmm.
afternoon, we have a 90-minute rest time. So we have homeschool all morning, and then everyone goes to their separate places and they read or listen to audiobooks, and they actually
Hmm.
really look forward to that. And I
Hmm.
try to use at least a portion of that time, not just to get work done or laundry, but to do something to fill up. So that might be
Mm.
painting, it might be a short workout, something that
Hmm.
is caring for my body and my soul.
Oh, yes. And that is it. I mean, you are hitting on it right there. Not on your image,
Yes,
but on
right.
your body and your soul, right? I
Yes.
mean, that is it.
Mm,
That is what we need to be caring for first and foremost. I
yes.
love, love, love that. So now I want to look at the book for just a few minutes.
Oh,
And
sure.
again, lift up your eyes. And I'm loving this. I really think it is so important for us to keep focus, right?
Yes.
Because when we lose focus,
Yes.
we lose it. It's
Totally.
so
Totally.
easy for us to become frustrated with ourselves. And if we're frustrated with
Absolutely.
ourselves and we're frustrated with our kids
Hmm.
and frustration with God, I mean, that is just not a good place to get.
Definitely.
Um, Talk to me about the genesis of this book. What motivated it? 'Cause I feel
Yeah.
like I hear your heart as I read through it, and
Oh,
I just am like,
yes.
oh, yes, yes, yes,
Oh,
yes. But tell me, what
yeah.
inspired this? It's just beautiful.
Thank you. So I was inspired. A publisher came to me and said, would you be interested in writing a devotional for moms? And originally they
Hmm.
wanted to call it Morning Moments for Moms, which we actually have a product called Morning Moments. But I
Okay.
thought, I really want to root this in one passage of scripture.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
the passage that kept coming back to me was Psalm 121, which
Yep.
begins, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come?
Hmm.
And then the rest of that psalm talks about who God is and the promises
Hmm.
that he has for his people. And so
Yes.
what I did was there are 8 verses in the psalm,
Hmm.
and I went verse by verse and studied an attribute of God that we
Hmm.
see in that
Yep.
verse. So that he is our helper, our protector, our provider, our shepherd, our sustainer. So
Hmm.
8 attributes in all. And then under each one, there's 5 devotions that pertain
Hmm.
specifically to moms, that we can lift our eyes to God, in those characteristics. And so,
Hmm.
my heart is really to get women to, I hope they taste some of this and are drawn to deeper study of the word, because it is
Hmm.
it is word rich. And so
Yes.
I want them to know what it means to lift your eyes to God right in the middle of what can feel like chaos, and especially in
Hmm.
early motherhood. There's a picture that I just keep thinking of as I've been talking about this book and promoting it, and this is part of the book. But in Matthew 14, when Jesus is walking on the water on the Sea of
Hmm.
Galilee, and Peter asks to walk with him on the water.
Hmm.
And Jesus says, yes, come on. And so Peter puts his foot over the side of the boat, and for a few steps, his eyes are fixed on Jesus, and
Hmm.
he is able to miraculously walk on the water. But it isn't long before he is looking around at,
Hmm.
the water underneath his feet, the wind and the waves. And as soon as he starts looking around at his circumstances, he
Hmm.
begins to drown.
Yeah.
And we can do the same thing. We can look at
Yeah.
everything that has been put on our plate, and sometimes it is a lot. But when we
Hmm.
fix our eyes on our circumstances,
Yes.
we can drown in that pit of despair instead of looking to
Yes.
Jesus and saying, Lord, what have you called me to? And how are
Hmm.
you going to equip me and sustain me and strengthen me for the work that
Hmm.
you've given? And so I want moms to look straight to him and straight to his word. And so the book is just full of his promises that are
Hmm.
especially tender for moms.
And it is. I mean, I love one of my favorite component aspects, I guess, of
Yeah.
a study of the Gospels is how many times Jesus meets someone right where they are.
Yes.
I mean, there are obviously occasions we see when he had to go to Samaria, right? He meets the woman at the
Sure.
well, and then he goes to the pool of Siloam and he meets that man very intentionally. So there are
Yes.
times when he goes and it seems obvious that he is on a mission to meet a specific individual, and that alone, that'll preach all day long into
Oh,
our
yeah.
Sunday. But
Yes.
it's the ones that he meets right where they are,
Yes.
and it's just
Yes.
so beautiful because that tells me that he meets me where I am.
Exactly.
And all through this, it is replete with all of these different places that we as moms find ourselves. I
Yes.
mean, I love, I just can I, I'm going to just read a
Of
few of these. They're
course.
just so glorious. Um, when you feel like your cup is dry.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
We've all been
yes,
there.
everybody's been there. When you're
Yes.
feeling lonely, when it feels too hard, when
Hmm.
you're angry. I love the
Yeah.
rawness of that
Yeah.
because we get
I,
ticked.
Yes, totally. I want people to know. I mean, I share very vulnerably about my
Mm,
struggles with anger,
mm,
especially in the early postpartum
oof.
phase, and
Yes.
how hard that is with the hormones and the lack of sleep and all of that, and some regrets that I have that
Mm-hmm.
I was not looking to the Lord. I felt
Mm,
really out of control, but how, like you said, God met me there and
mm.
redeemed me from that pit. And so I
Yes.
want people to know, women to know, they are not alone in these struggles.
Yes.
And even if we can't see what's going on, the Lord sees and he
Mm.
cares and will sustain them.
Yeah, and he's he's there. And these are real things,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Because I think, I love this one. When you feel tempted to speak harshly to your children,
Yeah.
you know, yes, the battle for
Yes.
discontentment, when it feels
Yes.
mundane,
Yeah.
when you're tempted toward laziness,
Yeah.
when, oh, this is the one that got me. We moved 3 times in 3 years, once
Oh my
upon a time.
goodness. Ooh, that's rough.
And this, I guess, part six, the first lesson, when life is not going as you planned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I really had a good plan,
Totally.
and yeah. And let's see, what there was another one I wanted to say. When you
Oh
need wisdom and how to parent, like every day,
my goodness. All the time.
um, when church hurts.
Hmm.
When you're having a rough day. So that one's going to be tear stained and earmarked and underlined
Yeah.
and circled and highlighted,
I
right,
hope
by
so.
everybody.
I really
And
hope
then
so.
and then the last one, when your cup overflows. I
Mm,
mean, Whitney, this is every mom every
mm.
day. This is
Yeah.
this isn't like a book you read once. This is like
Yeah.
a reference book you pull off, where you are today,
Thank you. I hope so. I hope it'll be a great gift for even baby showers, where,
Yes.
okay, you may not need this right this minute, but you might in 6 months from now, because
Yeah.
we need these reminders.
Yeah, I think it's a great resource, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do it and
Thank you.
speaking truth. I'm glad it's not fluffy, and I
No,
congratulate you on that.
thank you. Yeah, it's hard in devotionals these days. You find a lot of fluff, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want that. I was
Mm-mm.
yeah, so we need that depth, especially
Mm-hmm.
as young moms, and I
Yes.
think a lot of us think, well, I'll study the Bible more deeply when I'm a little bit older, but we need
Yeah.
these truths right now. We need
Right.
them in the present when we are really struggling. So,
Yeah. And I think too, it falls right back underneath those 3 pillars you mentioned. It's
mhm.
beautiful. And I forget the middle one. Tell me the middle one.
Biblical
Biblical and
and
manageable.
manageable.
It's all of
Yes.
those, right?
Well,
I mean,
thank you.
this
Yes.
is what a mom, so you might want to take it into the bathroom with you, right?
Yes.
Just for that, one moment that you get of quiet.
Yes.
Or you could even hold this while you're nursing a baby, in my imagination.
Sure.
Or maybe
Yes.
you've just separated those two siblings, that somebody's not being truthful and you can't tell which one, and you just
Exactly.
need to read something.
Totally.
So, yeah, I want to really thank you for writing, and thanks for
You.
coming today. I
Oh
really
my goodness,
appreciate
this
it.
was a joy. This was absolutely a joy to be here and just talk with a kindred spirit.
Yes, definitely. Tell our audience where they can meet you, and tell us especially about those painting lessons, because I'm very tempted to look
Yes,
that up. But tell us where we can
sure.
find you.
So you can find me on Instagram at Brighter Day Press. I share a lot of book recommendations and just our daily life as a family. And you can find me also on brighterdaypress.com. And there's a classes tab that have all of our online watercolor classes. And there's also a book lists tab with all of our book list recommendations. So all of that is available on brighterdaypress.com.
Thank you so much, Whitney. I feel like I've made
Yes.
a new best friend today in our
Absolutely.
time
What a
together.
joy.
The
Yes.
Lord bless you and bless this book. And
Thank
moms, I hope
you.
that you've been encouraged today. Make sure you pick up your copy, and pick up two and give one to a friend that needs encouragement. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Have a great afternoon.